Hey guys, welcome to Already Christianity. Appreciate you joining us. Today we're going to talk about a topic that it seems like it's come up lately more and more. It has to do, of course, with Israel. Cover your ears, Saulo. And, well, Israel and replacement theology. Many call it covenant theology, right? I'm going to ask you a lot of questions, George, the most I can without throwing up on myself because I downed all my food before we jumped on, as usual. And Davi always busts my chops about doing that. But we finished so late, I can't eat that late. Excuse me. So has Israel replaced the church? That's what replacement theology references, right? Yeah. Now, some people don't like calling it replacement theology. They call it covenant theology, that there's a covenant, but that I guess the church has taken over the covenant, covenant, or expanded the covenant. Okay, well, there's a Mosaic covenant, right?
Yeah.
And then there's Abrahamic covenant.
And we don't see those people tripping over themselves to take over the Mosaic covenant, so you know it must be the other one.
Yeah, the Mosaic covenant. Well, you're going to talk.
Yeah, where's the line? Where's the line forming? Trying to take over the.
A lot of people understand that stuff.
Yeah.
So I think we need to break it down, and we need to understand that, and why. Number one, where this came from in the first place. Where did replacement theology come from?
Oh man, yeah, it goes way back. It goes way back from the beginning. I mean, really, probably if you had to pin it down, within the first 4 to 5 centuries.
So even if
and I don't say this sarcastically, I mean it literally and scholastically, you can certainly there's plenty of information to back this up. A lot of scholastic work to back this up, and that is at some point, all the Gentiles in the church forgot that every single Christian that started the church in the time of Jesus and immediately thereafter happened to be these people called Jews. And so at some point, they actually forgot that, and they began to read the Bible from the prism of a non-Jewish person. And so you started saying, and I don't mean to just blame people. I mean, there were patristics. There were church fathers who took that view. I mean, chief among them probably Origen and Chrysostom, and I would say Irenaeus, to name just a few. But it became a pretty dominant view inside early Catholic Christianity. So it's not like it's some...
Why'd you make that distinction?
Because it was. I mean, I just want to point out to people that up until the Protestant Reformation, it's just a matter of history. It's not a dig on Catholicism. I mean, I've got my own criticisms of Catholicism, but I won't air those today. Just to simply say that until you get to the 16th century and the Protestant Reformation,
Catholicism was the church.
Yeah, exactly.
There wasn't non-denominational Protestants. It was either, so if you were a Jew or a Gentile, and Gentile meant you were either an atheist, Hindu, Buddhist, or Catholic. If you were a Christian, you were Catholic.
Sure.
All right.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean,
and so this goes way back. But what's the origin of it? Why did that argument come up? What was the whole idea about replacing the Jews? Was it something to do with because they had rejected Christ, from my understanding?
Yeah. I mean, this is why I think you're seeing a resurgence of it today for the same reason that you saw resurgences of it then. It is a historical fact that where you see replacement theology pick up in the church and in society, well, more true then, since societies were decidedly more Christian than they are today, certainly in Europe and the United States. Wherever you see a resurgence of replacement theology, you also see Jews running for cover. Because replacement theology and anti-Semitism have always gone hand in glove. At least surges of anti-Semitism in society. It's easy to understand that. If you marginalize Israel spiritually, and you asked an important question, where did it all start? I mean, just intellectually. And it's just a notion that, look, let's face it, that the Jews denied Jesus. In fact, more directly said, in their view, the Jews killed Jesus. Yeah. And so they killed him, they denied him. Therefore, the kingdom was snatched away from them. And you asked me this week, somebody had sent a text about Matthew 21:43, which follows a series of parables where Jesus is talking about the kingdom of heaven being taken away, and he's addressing Jews. And so there's a lot of extrapolation. There's just extrapolating the conclusion way beyond the proper context of the passage. And there's a number of passages like that.
I think Matthew 21, you brought it up. Can you get?
Yeah, let's go ahead. Let's go ahead and look at
Matthew 21. Matthew 21. What is it?
Matthew 21:43, and it follows a parable that goes back at least 10 verses, where it's the parable of the wicked servants.
So, you're saying the people that support replacement theology use this passage.
It's just one of them. This is a critical one because they're saying, "Aha, Jesus is doing that," and this is just really it's unfortunate It truly is, because that is not at all. Jesus is actually quite clear. The parable, not only is Jesus clear in Matthew 21:43 who he's addressing, but he's clear in verse 44. He's clear in verse 40. In 45, it's really damning, because the people that he's addressing actually state that he's addressing them, and he's not making some huge national statement here. And so we should go there and just read it, because this is a chief verse. And so I let's just let the passage speak for the passage.
No,
So,
you got it? No?
are you able to pull it up? Okay. Well, I can.
I got it here. So Matthew 21:43.
Sure.
Well, you want me to do 42 or no? Jesus said to them, have you never read in the scriptures, the stone that the builders rejected has become the cornerstone? He's talking about himself, right?
Right. A rejection of him.
So they rejected him, and the person they
Right.
rejected become the cornerstone. This was the Lord's doing, and it is marvelous in our eyes. 42, therefore I tell you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people producing its fruits. That's pretty compelling if you just on the surface, right?
Sure.
And the one who falls on this stone will be broken to pieces.
Now read verse 45.
And when it falls on anyone, it will crush him. Verse 45. When the chief priests and the Pharisees heard his parables, they perceived that he was speaking about them.
Who?
He's speaking about them.
And addressing them. They're the audience. This isn't some...
Yeah, but couldn't you argue that he's addressing the audience and telling you, hey guys, the kingdom's going to be taken away from you?
You, right. So what he's saying is, and by the way, it doesn't even make sense to make it about national Israel, because if he's explaining a parable, and they knew that he was talking about them.
Oh, you're talking specifically the Pharisees, not national Israel.
Right.
Oh, I see what you're saying now. I'm sorry, I missed that. I see your point.
These are people walking already
I mean, the Pharisees don't represent Israel.
Oh, they represented in the sense that they were the leaders of Israel, but he's addressing them as being, shitty stewards of national Israel. And so, by the way, all of the conflicts, and I would challenge people to go through the Gospels and find all of these examples of Jesus going after miscellaneous Jews. All of his conflicts, all of them, are with these leaders of Israel. All of them. And so he is calling into question the way they have manipulated the scriptures to do, frankly, acts of injustice to their own people and to misrepresent God. And to the point where he overturned the table of money changers. There's two occurrences of that. You always point that out in John chapter 2, I think in Matthew 21. Right in this chapter.
Well, then 2 chapters later, Matthew 23, Jesus uses some pretty colorful language.
At who?
At the Pharisees.
At all of Israel?
The seven woes to the Pharisees.
Right, and there's
the scribes and Pharisees is right there.
There's a theme. There's a theme here, and so I guess this is just a great example. It seems because they call it out. They say they knew he was addressing them. And it's not just here. I mean, it's throughout the book of Matthew. He is constantly clashing with the Jewish priestly caste about very bad stewardship.
I don't want to derail us, but I have to ask this question because I think the question I'm going to ask you is something that I've always struggled with. Because, I mean, to me, George, I could give a crap, right? I'm just being honest with you. Whether replacement theology is biblical or not, I just want to follow Jesus. So if replacement theology is backed up by God's word, then I'm all in. If it's not, then I'm all out. I mean, I'm with Jesus.
Seems like a reasonable position
I don't care.
That I take.
So my point is this. So you have, and I think a lot of people, I really believe people get caught up on the whole chosen people. They define chosen people as people that are chosen by God to have this one-way ticket to heaven, and they don't need Christ. That they're carved out of the gospel, the requirement of believe in your heart, profess in your mouth that Jesus is Lord, and that God raised him from the dead, and that you will be justified, you'll be saved.
Romans chapter 10, verses 9 through 13.
Yes. So I think that's what many people believe. And then, okay, so if you say, well, it doesn't mean that, because we've answered that before, and we'll dissect it if people watching want us to again. It just means that God chose this people to usher in the gospel message to the world. Mm-hmm. We have a Jewish Messiah. We have to contend with that. That's just it. I mean, when he was on earth, he chose the ethnicity of a Jew. That's a fact. I mean, that's whether we like it or not. So that's fine.
Yes.
But, so you've chosen, that's why the chosen people can only mean that they were chosen for what? To usher in the gospel message, and that's it? Because it's just weird to me that if God chose this group of people to send his son to and to present the gospel message to the world, but every Jew that has passed away, and I'm going to go on my time continuum.
Okay.
So the Jewish people before Christ, if they believed in Yahweh and they were circumcised, not of the heart, but physically, and they were all in with Jesus. I mean, with Jesus is God, but you know what I mean. With Yahweh, they're with the Lord, right? Are we good there? Every Jew prior to Jesus,
Okay.
right?
Yeah. Who was a person of righteousness. It's not just any Jew because they're an ethnic Jew.
I'm sorry, I said every Jew that said yes to Yahweh, that was in with God.
Yeah, like Abraham.
Abraham, Jacob, Isaac, all of them, David, right?
To whom whose faith was ascribed to as righteousness, as he said to Abraham. Yes.
So all I'm saying, pre-Jesus, all the Yahweh Jews, I'll just call them Yahweh Jews, sorry. All the Yahweh Jews, because if they weren't Yahweh Jews, then they're not, right? All the Yahweh Jews are with the Lord. Then Jesus on the scene. And every Jew post-Jesus that has not accepted Christ as the way, the truth, the life, John 14:6, and Romans 10:9-13, like you said, and if they passed away without Jesus, then they're separated.
Well, let's
from the
make it
Lord.
more direct. Maybe Salo can look it up for us. Romans chapter 2, verse 11, Paul. Saul, I just called you Paul. I upgraded Salo.
Because you thought of Saul of Tarsus. He's the Saul of Tarsus.
And he looks Jewish.
Yeah.
So I was going to say...
Sideburns.
I was...
Stupid.
I was going to say that you always sort of couch it in no one gets a free pass terms.
Yes, I always do.
Right. Romans chapter 2, verse 11. And I think that Paul was probably the guy who invented that concept. Can we bring it up, or is that possible?
I have it here, but there it is.
Right.
Where there is no respect of persons.
Any question?
In the ESV, it says, "For God shows no partiality."
Okay, and what he's addressing is a church made up of Jews and Gentiles. Okay, so there is no respecter of persons. In the context here is clearly a person who is saved, a person who is in God's fold. Israel, the word Israel itself actually has a meaning. It means governed by God. That's actually what it literally means. So it's in this context that he makes the claim that no one gets a free pass. He begins the letter to Romans.
But these chosen people are not going to be with the Lord.
Right, but so we have to talk about what that means.
Oh, yeah, that's why I'm getting that. That's why I want to know it.
So I'm going to go back to the scripture. And I'm going to go back to two scriptures. Romans chapter 12 verses, Genesis 12 verses 1-3, which is the Abrahamic covenant. And then I'm going to see a restatement of what it means to be chosen in Deuteronomy chapter 7 verse 6. This is as they're about to go into...
Romans 12 what? This is the famous Ted Cruz, Tucker Carlson deal, right?
Yeah, which Ted Cruz just completely butchered, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's terrible.
It was just really just a terribly lost opportunity.
And I will bless them. Go ahead.
I bless them that bless thee, and curse him that curse you. That's King James. I like it. Thanks, all. And in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed. So that there's it's a tripartite, unconditional covenant. And the reason it's unconditional is because the context of Genesis chapter 12, because we're not going to read all of it, is that it's an everlasting covenant. It's reiterated again in Genesis chapter 15 when God ratifies the covenant. Abraham falls asleep. And then God is the only one who ratifies the covenant. He uses an ancient Near Eastern convention where he's literally walking literally in the middle of a split animal, which I realize is gross by our standards today. But it was a way to sort of symbolize a covenant. When you got into a covenant, it cost you something. When you got out of it, it cost you something. It cost that animal something. So God is the only one while Abraham's asleep, and the symbolism is powerful, and it shouldn't be missed on the reader. God is the only party of that covenant. This is unconditional, meaning it doesn't matter that Abraham's descendants are dipshits and do dipshit things. That doesn't matter, and I don't mean every descendant. You know what I'm talking about. It's irrelevant because that's not what this is about. The Mosaic covenant hinges on conduct. It hinges on faithfulness of the Jews.
Just so people know, so the Mosaic covenant was a covenant that Moses, God through Moses, wanted to his people to be set apart and distinguished between other people. There was a lot of different tribes, different people, polytheistic, right? They're all worshiping all kinds of crap. And he said, I want my people to stand out.
Yes.
Right? I mean, so
that's correct.
This Mosaic covenant had to do with their conduct.
Yes, being holy as God is holy, being a people that take
holy just meaning set apart. So if everybody does A, these people under the Mosaic covenant should do B.
Set apart for the exclusive worship of Yahweh.
Right.
And so what does that look like? And then there's a series of stipulations which we talk about, which should govern their conduct. And conduct matters because conduct is the only way that we know as a community of believers whether you actually believe what you've professed internally.
Well, Jesus said
right?
that I think you judge a tree by its fruit, right? So he cared about, why do you call me Lord, Lord in Luke and not do what I say? So
Not a new concept.
Yeah, Jesus, it's the same.
In fact, that's what Jesus does. That's a great point. That's part of the Sermon on the Mount. And Jesus is actually reiterating the principles of the Deuteronomic Code. And so all of this is very consistent. God cares about conduct because as we are learning now, because we're going through an Old Testament survey.
Love it.
And what we're learning is that the keeping of the covenant is a welcome card. It welcomes. God knows that his presence is welcome because you actually comport yourself in a way that emulates that you are his kid. So it matters how you conduct yourself. It's always mattered. It's mattered in the Old Testament. It's mattered in the New Testament. Now, what we had is a bunch of people who took God out of his own law. They said, we got it from here, thanks very much. And they basically sought to identify themselves with the law versus then identifying themselves with the lawgiver. So the whole relationship thing got lost, which is why they fell on their faces. That's an interesting parallel to what happens in the New Covenant as well. By the way, we have the same problems today, right? We want to do Jesus without Jesus. We want to do Jesus on our terms.
And I know God gives us free will and free agency. I get that. Absolutely, because he doesn't want a bunch of robots. Of course, he could have made a world where there was no evil and people chose him, but then there wouldn't be a relationship. He'd be a bunch of robots. Got it. But I think what I've struggled with over the years, and I think people that I've conversed with, is that God has his chosen people that are going to hell.
I know, because
there's no other way to say it, right?
Because let's talk about what chosen.
But that's correct.
Well, sure, but he's got people who profess to be Christians
and they're going to hell
who
too.
are allegedly chosen.
I got it.
And who
but at least they're pretending to be fake going the right way. These people are just rejecting Messiah, and so I'm not going to let you off. Not that you're trying to get away. I think there needs to be a clear understanding is what does it mean to be his chosen people? Because I understand
in the context in which it was stated, you've got three components of this unconditional blessing.
Verse 3.
Yes, unconditional covenant. The first one is land, seed, and blessing. And by land, we're talking about, it's pretty intuitive, the actual land. There are parameters between Genesis 12 and Genesis 15.
Why is God giving them certain land?
Because he's creating a nation, and nations need land, right? Okay. Every nation needs a land. Every nation needs borders. They need a language, and they need a culture, the way they do things, right, to identify themselves as a particular national culture. So God is creating a nation from Abrahamic descendants. Okay. Now, obviously, we know where this is going. We know where this nation's going. We know what the point of the nation is. Well, he says, I'm going to give you land. Not depending on what you do, but I'm going to bless you with land, with seed, and with blessing. Now,
land, seed, and blessing. Okay.
Right. Now, land isn't some spiritual land. Let's not embarrass ourselves with some weird allegory around land. Land is land. In fact, he talks about the land of Canaan.
He describes it, right?
He does.
And why that? But they've never had that land.
They've never had the full parameters of the promised land. That remains an open promise to be kept. So this notion that national Israel is now is no longer of concern to God.
Is he going to give them that land regardless, or is it conditional?
No, this is part of an unconditional covenant. Now,
so no matter what, they can still flip the bird at him.
No,
tell him to piss off.
No,
and they're still getting that land.
No, that's not.
Okay,
that's an excellent question. It's an excellent question. No, not at all. There's going to be national Israel is going to be redeemed, and by national Israel, obviously, salvation comes to individuals. It doesn't come to nations. And so the formula for salvation that you just brought up at the top of the hour, Romans chapter 10, verses 9 to 13, again, a contextual block, is dependent on an individual commitment to Christ. It's not some national commitment. But the simplest example I use is if you look at national Israel now, it's obvious that they are in opposition to Messianic Judaism. That shouldn't be a controversy. It's obvious. So national Israel as it is now isn't going to inherit that. But there's going to be a national Israel that will. Now,
is this after Christ comes back and they've
That's correct. The 1,000-year reign, and we'll get into premillennialism at some point.
Yeah.
There's a 1,000-year reign, and that's described in Revelations chapter 20. You could start in verse 1, go to verse 15. But there's a 1,000-year reign. That'll be a time to shore up promises.
A 1,000-year reign by Christ.
Correct.
He's coming back.
Yes.
He's gonna. People are gonna know it's Christ.
That's correct.
And people are still gonna reject him.
Well, there's going to be people who are going to be. There's a shoring up of people who have been holding out. This will be a time
Well,
of,
yeah, if Christ comes back, you better get your shit together.
brother,
I mean, he's right.
you're the one that always points out, which
mean,
you should,
Matthew
literally
28.
5 minutes from doing all these miracles and an ascension, they're still wondering.
Doubting, yeah, I know.
So, I mean, never underestimate. What did P.T. was it P.T. Barnum who said, Salo, never underestimate the stupidity of the American people? It's not just Americans.
Yeah.
So, I mean, this is the human condition. But notice that we've touched already on 5 major topics here. I'm just trying to get back to these 3 components.
So I'm sorry.
Three components of this unconditional covenant: land,
seed,
Seed
and
is
blessing.
meant to be interpreted. We know that it should. Seed is descendants, because he talks in descendant terms immediately thereafter.
How many descendants? Because they don't have a lot of them.
No, he says as many as the stars. Too numerous to count.
But but they're not there yet. So we got.
Well, I mean, there's a nation. There's a lot of people. So I mean, I don't know if it's. He's using a metaphor there to describe the number of descendants that Abraham's going to have. He's going to build a great nation. So this is not. There's a metaphoric component in the sense that the seed, the spiritual seed and physical seed of Abraham is Jesus, but it's also descendants, because he talks about it. He mentions descendants in multiple places throughout the Old Testament. He's not just talking about Jesus the seed, because replacement theologians, that's a bit of an oxymoron, but replacement theologians try to allegorize the entire thing, which would be absurd, because if you look at the original context, he's clearly talking in the context of a nation. So the seed has a spiritual component and it has a physical component. Now, Jesus didn't spontaneously appear. He is a descendant of a lineage, right?
And then
so there's the seed, and then there's the blessing.
What's the blessing then?
Well, the blessing is twofold. So, Israel will be blessed, a blessed nation. Any nation that is responsible for ushering in the coming Messiah, who is the Savior, not of Israel, but of the entire world, including Israel. That's a pretty significant blessing. I don't think that's trivial. And then he also says that they're going to be a blessing. So they're not only going to be blessed as a nation as a result of that privilege, which they squander in many ways. Fair enough. You could argue the United States is squandering a lot of its grace you've been talking about in those terms. So every nation, to some extent, you could make that claim. Well, Israel squandered a lot of that grace in the Old Testament. True enough. So there's the sense in which they were privileged to bring about Jesus, but there's also the privilege of really being blessed as well, right? As the people who are chosen to bring about Jesus. So it's twofold. They're a blessing to the world, since Jesus comes from them. Salvation is from the Jews. And then they're also blessed as a result of that. I mean, do you see any other nation that God is working with as a shepherd in the Old Testament other than Israel?
Yeah,
No.
salvation doesn't come from the Jews themselves, but Christ came as a Jew. That's what that means, right?
Sure. Yeah, exactly.
Because people that aren't saved can't save you.
Correct.
Right.
Yeah,
And-
yeah. And I was trying to make the comment in context,
Well, I just-
but I'm glad
but
you're
I'm
pointing
sure
it
someone-
out, because I
someone
want
has that
somebody to
question.
hear that in isolation.
So what would you do? So let's play a game. You're on with Tucker Carlson, and you say you would know that it was Genesis 12:3 first of all, and he asked you the question he asked Ted Cruz about. So is the Israel that you're talking about in Genesis 12 the Israel of today, led by Bibi Netanyahu and the nation of Israel today?
Well, I would say yes and no.
Okay.
No, it's the same.
Explain both.
Well, I mean, it's Israel. It's a national component. It's a one for one. That's the nation of Israel. And I've heard all kinds of ridiculous arguments that somehow genetically they are not genetically the
Yeah,
same.
I've heard that.
I mean, it's just really absurd, and it's completely factually untrue. I mean, there have been plenty of genomic studies that show the people a significant portion, not all of them, because you have non-Jews who have married into Judaism. But sure, I mean, there are alleles, genetic markers inside that genetic population that trace back to ancient days. So that argument's completely out the window, and it's just an absurd argument. But if you would ask me, I would say yes and no. Now, how no? Well, because it's not a theocracy. It's still not a theocracy in Judaism. A theocracy is one where it's, even constitutionally, God's at the top of the Constitution. There's no such thing in Israel right now. I mean, you've got a parliament, basically. And it's a democracy, but it's not a theocracy.
So this in Genesis 12, it was a theocracy that they were discussing.
Well, not yet. Remember, this is Abraham. So it's hundreds of years, to the tune of 400 years before they actually go into the land of Canaan. And notice, it's interesting. It's not a small point.
And is that what the blessing is towards? Is a future blessing? Those that bless
Yes.
you will be blessed, and those that curse you. And so I guess So Cruz and anyone that uses this passage to defend today's Israel is misusing this passage.
If they allege in any way, or if they intimate in any way that the Jews get a special salvific pass, or there's some other path outside of the gospel, yeah, that's absurd.
Okay, but I don't think people use it that way. I think people use
It's understood that way.
Well, no, I think people use Genesis 12:3 to say that if you bless, you got to give Israel whatever the hell they want, agree with everything they say, and agree and support everything they do, or else you're cursed.
And yet, it's a red herring because it's never happened. It's literally
What's never happened?
Your supposition that's what they believe, or that's the argument they're making. It's never happened historically, and I've pointed out
What's never happened
the
historically?
notion that there's somehow there's been a state or a time in history when no matter what Israel did, they literally walked between the raindrops and everything was fine. That's never happened. I mean, if you read throughout the entire Old
People
Testament,
believe that now.
there are some people who believe that, but there's plenty of people who don't. In fact, what do you always say? I know somebody who sounds just like you and looks just like you, sends me lots of videos from Instagram proving that that's really not the case right now. But the point is, historically, Nico.
But what I'm saying is
hasn't
somebody
happened.
uses Genesis 12:3 to make that proposition.
Okay.
Because it seems like people in our government, people in the church, in certain areas of the church and certain divisions in the church, that never criticize Israel. Like ever. I mean,
And what I would say is,
and
there's not.
they may or may not be wearing a gray T-shirt. I'm just joking. I'm joking. You know, I'm busting your balls. All I'm saying is, but that would be a misuse of this passage, right?
Yes, of course. Actually, in fact, it would be the exact opposite.
So
Because
this
in the
doesn't
Old-
apply today.
No,
I really
no,
want to.
it does apply today. This is active and well. It's an
So
everlasting
why would
covenant.
how would if you cursed Israel, how would you be cursing Israel?
Okay, well, you want their demise. You want their destruction.
All right.
Right?
They don't have a right to-
You see them as subhuman. Ring a bell?
Like Iranians, government, the Iranian
sure.
government, not the people.
And I wouldn't even. You
I mean, one of their motto. What is it? One of their
from the
constitution.
river to
Well,
the
there's
sea.
the thing, it's
the
to
old
kill-
Palestinian coming out of Gaza, right?
Yeah, they
From
just
the river to
can't.
the sea.
Like
Right.
Israel cannot exist.
From the Mediterranean, yes, to the river. It's by the notion of a curse isn't a disagree. Do you disagree with Nico or do you curse him? That would be absurd to suggest that they're the same thing. So the entire Old Testament is riddled with God disagreeing with the Jews. So was he anti-Semitic?
Exactly. I tell that to people all the time. He was silent to them for 400 years. I mean, he let them. If you read the book of Judges, he allowed them to be conquered 12 different times.
Their own
That's why
prophets
Yeah.
were preaching judgment
Yeah.
throughout the entire Old Testament.
I agree with you. I mean, people just really have that. I'm with you 100%
I don't get
on
it.
that.
I don't understand it. That's what I'm saying. At least biblically and historically, I don't know when there was ever a piece of history that was actually sanitized with that view or exclusive to that view. It's never happened. So the point is that this is an unconditional covenant. And then if you flip over to Deuteronomy chapter 7, you get chosen language. And so this is what
Deuteronomy what? So
Deuteronomy
I want
chapter
to
7,
put
verse
a
6.
bow on this thing, just Genesis 12, because it comes up all the time. So with all due respect, the senator misused this quote. I mean, this passage.
because
I think he tied Genesis 12:3 to why he supports Israel. Am I right?
but didn't explain it. So it left it open to interpretation to the kinds of conclusions that you're bringing up that replacement theologians would object to.
Right.
And that's a problem, man. He left that on the table and he shouldn't have. And so here we are. And it's not because of him. This happens left and right, where you've got people who know they should support.
In your support of Israel, I'm so sorry, it's like
ahead.
cross-examination, but I want to get to the point. In your support of Israel, do you contemplate in your thinking Genesis 12:3?
Well, sure.
So it's part of it, or it's just.
No, of course it is. Yeah.
And
it
what
is.
part of it? The blessing, you mean correct them, but they have a right to live?
Because God has
exist.
God has an everlasting covenant with Israel. Okay?
The land.
It does not include coming to him or being saved apart from Christ.
I got that. No,
Okay.
I'm with you on that.
But he has an everlasting covenant to
With-
national Israel.
Okay, what do you mean by national Israel?
I mean that the nation of Israel, this is a national proposition. There's a national land. There are national land parameters. That's going to be shored up. Yes, that's right. You will have a national Israel. And remember, you've got a Davidic king who's going to sit in Jerusalem. He's going to be a Jewish king, meaning in the sense that he came through the ethnicity of the Jews. That's Christ. He's going to come back and he's going to rule in Jerusalem. That's a national proposition over a Jerusalem that bows their knees.
What does the replacement theologian? I know it's a weird word, but what does the replacement supporter say about that, about Revelations and Jesus
That's an
coming
excellent
back?
question. So replacement theology and supersessionism are the same thing. And I actually think supersessionism is a better way to represent it. They believe that the covenants made between God and Israel have been superseded
By the church.
by the church. And I always find that's funny because we've got the church referenced in two places in Matthew chapter 16 and 19. And the reality is that the church doesn't mean anything like we use it today. It simply means gathering. That's it. And so that's been extrapolated into this kind of political entity now. We got to be real careful.
Ecclesia, right? Is that how it translates?
Right. We got to be real careful because what we've done is we've interjected into the Gospels an understanding of church that isn't even in the Gospels.
Okay, so when you say can you do people make the argument? Can you make the argument that national Israel includes or doesn't include the government of Israel today?
Well, national is going to include a government. Do I think Bibi Netanyahu is going to be part of that? No.
Okay, got it.
and neither does Salo.
Right.
But
No,
but
I promise you Salo doesn't.
national Israel and national Israel means just what it means. You've got a nation and you've got a governance of the nation, but the national Israel, the leaders of nation, imagine for a moment of them being in submission to Jesus Christ, lovers of Christ, supporters of Christ, followers of Christ. That's the nation of Israel in the
time,
right, in the eschatological era.
And so eschatology meaning end times.
Yes.
So I want to make sure people are following us. And so got it. So Genesis 12:3
1 to 3
is one
Yep.
one but is partially applicable today and partially not. Essentially.
The land is applicable,
Got it?
right? The seed is applicable,
Okay.
and the blessing is applicable. Why would the blessing still not be applicable? I mean, there's no need to say that none of that is applicable. Where's the rub? I'd like to truly understand what's the rub.
And the blessing again is what?
Well, the blessing is just the fact that Jesus has come through.
Okay, just that.
So they've been a blessing to the world. Salvation is from the Jews. Jesus, by the way, said that in John chapter 4. I think it's verse 22. Because he was making that statement of himself. And he was actually making the argument that I'm here first for the Jew and then for the Gentile. He came for his people ethnically. He started at home.
And they rejected him.
And they rejected him. Fair enough. Who rejected him? Did every single? No. You know why I know that?
Because the first Christians were Jewish.
All of them.
Yeah.
And so this is the point. This is the rub we're going to have to address here. We really just a lot of supersessionists never deal with the fact that for centuries, virtually all of the Christians were Jewish. And it's just crazy to me. This notion of church is meant to be, and this is Paul's metaphor in Romans chapter 11, uses this olive tree and the grafting, right? Okay. So you have this body of believers, this olive tree, and then you have the natural branches. And the natural branches have been unfaithful, right? And there's a remnant he talks about.
Yeah.
Now, what does that mean? It means that there's a group of individuals who remain faithful and who are faithful and who bow their knee to Christ and who receive the gospel. In fact, he's talking to them right now in Romans. And so the letter to Romans is dealing with a church that is now seeing lots of Jews and some Gentiles come together. And so Paul is giving them kind of an intro of who they are and who Israel is. And it's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful letter because these people are coming together and they're sharing in their commitment to Christ. But here, this is very important. That does not mean that God's blessings for Israel, which do not, I keep saying this over and over again,
Keep going.
which do not mean that they can be saved through any other name other than Jesus, remain intact. And I want to know what is the problem with that? What exactly is the issue that God has?
I think it's people misinterpreting what that means. I really do. From as an observer who really didn't. I mean, I'm watching from the outside, trying to get a lay of the land before I jump into the fray. This has been some time now, and I don't claim to be an expert, but it really comes down to the definition of what it means to be God's chosen people. And then the reason why I hung out in Genesis 12, or the beginning of Genesis 12, is because a lot of people use that. And they use it in the way of you bless Israel, and they define blessing Israel as agreeing with Israel on everything, never criticizing Israel, you can't rebuke Israel. I mean, look, God rebuked them numerous times. I mean, and so theoretically, the church, America, everybody can rebuke Israel if the government is doing some shitty stuff.
And I hope they would.
Okay. And so you rebuke them. It doesn't mean God's not still going to fulfill his promise to them ultimately, because for 1900 years, people got to remember this. And I heard this argument why they don't support replacement theology. One of many, of course, they went into scripture as well. Was how do you explain that the state of Israel is after almost 2,000 years is back in existence? I mean, if God had really replaced them, then they're gone.
Well, not just that, but where they're supposed to be.
And a portion
despite all opposition.
Right. So I mean, it's interesting. So I put that in submit that into evidence. I mean, it's something that people.
Well, you got to grapple with it.
But you have to toil with that. But I think a lot of people, I really believe, and George, I think I'm pretty good at pinning up. And Sal, you tell me if I'm wrong, but I really think it's the whole chosen people, because you listen to people like Candace and Tucker. I mean, this is condescending. Oh, the chosen people. And look, there's a lot of disgusting Jewish people out there that spit on Christians, talk shit about Jesus. I mean, all kinds of stuff. And they'll get what they deserve, right? I mean, at the right time, if they don't bend a knee and repent before they leave this earth. But I think people, and all that's going on. And then you have, I mean, I think Bibi's a shady cat, man. But that's me. I mean, I don't think he's wrong about everything, but I definitely don't think he's right about everything. You know, I have a lot of criticism of him.
Don't disagree.
And so people think, like, when you take a Ted Cruz position, you have him when he says something, and I really, like you said, he really missed the mark on that.
Way off.
I'm going to say, why do you support Israel? Because of Genesis 12.
Especially given the platform.
That's what like what people feel. We gotta support anything they do.
I agree, and I think that's the mistake.
But it should be a red flag right out of the gate, because forget Israel for a moment. Is there anyone you agree with totally? And I mean, I don't agree with my wife 100% of the time, and she's really easy to agree with.
And
so
there's a difference when you say bless Israel. Well, I bless Nico too, right? What's the difference between me blessing?
Well, we should talk about that. We can talk about that.
What's
So
the
in the
difference
context
between
of blessing,
and blessing Nico.
well, brother.
I curse Israel and I curse Nico.
I'm gonna tell you something that Brother George said a few weeks ago, and I thought it was good. Blessing Israel also includes correcting them. Dare I say, rebuking them if it's appropriate.
So that's
If
the
it's-
thing.
if it's
What's
appropriate.
The difference then between them and us?
What do you mean? What do you
What
mean?
you say if I bless him, correcting them?
Okay, well,
since
Salo,
correcting was the church.
Salo, in a sense, there's no difference. But in a sense, there's a huge difference, because history matters. And so as a nation, I bless the nation of Israel. I bless them because God has blessed them. So what does it mean to curse Israel? Again, and this isn't a mystery. You don't have to go too far, especially today on the internet, to see what cursing Israel sounds like. You've got people who are literally looking for their extermination. I mean, it's not just people from an Islamic background, and it's not just the Palestinian cult that we see just sort of heaving horrors down on Israel. I mean, it's just people who say nasty things about Israel in an anti-Semitic way. What do I mean by that? Anti-Semitism, the spirit of anti-Semitism goes to the notion that there's something inherently wrong with the Jew. And this has led to many anti-Semitic, and I mean violent, well-documented upsurgences in society against Jews that have led to their extermination. And you've heard me say in here many times, people ought to look up the pogroms, Pogroms.
And I think
throughout the ages, you've seen exterminations. It always starts like that: censorship,
and you're
isolating.
you're very sensitive to that, and rightfully so. But I think some people take that your ultra sensitivity to that, because you see where it goes, as you're over, like you're.
I'm just trying to answer Silas.
I know,
what does it
brother,
mean to bless? Well, I pray. I don't pray violence on Israel.
No,
I pray
of course
for,
not.
I pray for blessing on Israel.
I agree.
I pray for the peace of Jerusalem. I pray chiefly that their leaders and their people would come to a saving knowledge of the Lord Jesus Christ, first and foremost.
Because the country's not run very biblically. I mean, they're very progressive. There's a lot there's a lot that goes on in Israel that's not kosher, if I can use the word, no pun intended, to biblical understanding, right?
It's the most consistently Christian country in the Middle East. Oh, okay. Really? Is there?
I mean, compared to Yemen, I got it.
Well, I mean,
I
think that's saying something.
I mean, okay.
Yeah, and I'm going to compare them to France too.
Yeah.
Or how about the
fair
UK?
enough.
How's the UK doing?
Well, they got dominated. Those idiots, they gave their country away. They gave their country away. Those idiots.
You post anything in Israel online about Islam, for instance, you don't have a constable show up at your door the next day.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I'm saying is, in terms of freedom of speech, freedom of conscience, It's the closest thing to America, which is why the same individuals who hate America tend to hate Israel. It isn't America, but it's the closest thing to America in terms of its constitutional ideals that you're going to find anywhere. I think it used to be, with the exception of Europe. It's not anymore. Certainly in the Middle East and Europe. That's not nothing. That's something,
Right.
and it's something critical. But we can get into the politics of it. But I just want to point out that what we see is an unholy marriage today, and I said it up front. We see an unholy marriage between supersessionism and this sort of virulent anti-Semitism that we see, a sort of constant ill wishing on Israel, and the fundamental belief that there's something fundamentally wrong with the Hebrews, with the Jews.
Yeah, I think the people are nuts when they do that. Like Candace Tucker, Dave Smith. I mean, these people, Saulo, sorry. I mean, these people, because look, Israel is, I mean, I just,
The ones that we're protecting them too. And the ones that we're protecting them too.
Who?
As extreme as Tucker could be in Candace, there's also the extreme of the ones protecting.
And why'd you say that?
Hold on, I want to understand what you're saying before I criticize
Like
it.
a lot of people they go against Candace, going the other way, the other extreme.
Other extreme where?
The
Protecting the Jews. Oh yeah. Look. No one gets a pass.
Yeah.
The Christian doesn't get a pass. So why would the Jew?
Yeah.
I look at everything through the lens of the gospel and the Bible
That's the
and the
extreme
full
part.
counsel of God, Old and New Testament, as we're studying the full counsel of God, and no one gets a pass. And for anyone that advocates that anyone gets a pass, from the Jew to the Gentile to the Christian, no one gets a pass. So I'm with you on that. But when Tucker and Candace. And Tucker has said some stupid stuff about Islam lately that he's lost all credibility with me. Really has. That I can't imagine that guy's not bought out. But and then Candace is just, I mean, salivating hatred towards Israel. Just seems unreasonable when she says zero about Islam. And and you can't even compare. And I have dear friends of mine and a good buddy of mine that thinks that Islam and Israel and Judaism are like they're not even close. You're never going to win that objective fight to an unbiased jury. There's no way. Islam and its ideology, when militantly applied, based off the Hadith, the Quran, and the Sirah, I mean, they just can't compare. And it just drives me nuts how people are silent. Their hate for Israel is so over the top that they actually defend Iran and an Islamic ideology, like Tucker has. Tucker has lost his ever-loving, I want to say it that way because this is still some nice Christian people listen to this, so I'm not going to use the F word. But I mean, he's lost his mind. Just absolutely lost his mind. And now not everything he says is wrong, but man, he's just lost so much credibility with me. It's really a shame. But I guess back to our story about replacement theology. So you believe biblically, and I know you're going to go through some scripture, that the scriptures does not support replacement theology, right?
No, not at all. The exact opposite. And so I was looking it up and wanted Salo to, because I can't project it on the screen here. I don't know if you can, Salo, but I think it's worth bringing up. Romans chapter 11. There is, and I just want to point this out, we can't go through every single verse here, but we can certainly get to the heart of the context.
Start with Romans 11:1.
That's fine.
1 through 3. That's an interesting. I was in my study.
No, go more than that.
Well, I know, but I'm just saying, just start with that. I mean,
go to
that
verse
tells
7.
you. 1 to 7?
Yeah, go to
Okay,
Romans 11,
Romans
1
1
through
to 7.
And then we'll skip
Romans
over,
11.
We'll skip over some of the bridge and we'll go to 17 and 18.
You want me to read it? You gonna bring it up, Sal, or what?
11:7.
You and your damn new King James, or your King James. You can't even speak English. Why are you doing this King James? Okay, Mexican can't even speak English. So I'm gonna read.
More higher.
I'm gonna read ESV because I can't read that English crap. So they're an Islamic country these days anyway. So what does it matter? I asked then, has God rejected his people? So this is his people, right? This is the Jews.
Right. What's he
By
say?
no means.
By no means.
That's why I wanted to start there.
Yeah.
For I myself am an Israelite. So we have clearly he's talking about Israel, a descendant of Abraham, a member of the tribe of Benjamin. God has not rejected, just in case you didn't hear the first time, God has not rejected his people whom he foreknew. Do you not know that the scripture says of Elijah, how he appeals to God against Israel? Lord, they have killed your prophets. He's talking about Israel, right? Doing horrible things, Saulo. Lord, they have killed your prophets. The Israelites killed God's prophets. They have demolished your altars, and I alone am left, and they seek my life. But what is God's reply to them? I have kept for myself 7,000 men who have not bowed the knee to Baal.
Watch the parallel. Keep going.
Keep going. Verse 5. So too, at the present time,
Yes.
there is a remnant
Yes.
chosen by grace. Now, is this Calvinism or no? What do you mean remnant chosen by grace? They still had a choice, though, right?
Well, if you're chosen by grace, but how does that mean you're precluded a choice? I'm asking rhetorically. So he chose us by grace.
But we still had free will to reject him.
What was the mechanism? What is the mechanism by which God chooses people to enter into fellowship with him? Grace. We're saved by grace
through faith.
Yeah, that's
So
all.
so it doesn't say excluding faith. It's grace through. Okay, I'm just making sure this can. I'm thinking like as I'm in the audience.
Cross-examine mind. Yep.
But if it is by grace, it is no longer on the basis of works. Otherwise, grace would no longer be grace.
Okay.
What then? You said go to 7, right?
Please.
What then? Israel failed to obtain what it was seeking. The elect obtained it, but the rest were hardened. And it is written, God gave them a spirit of stupor, eyes that would not see and ears that would not hear, down to this very day. Keep going.
Yeah, please.
And David says, let their table become a snare, a trap, and a trap, a stumbling block and retribution for them. Let their eyes be darkened so that they cannot see and bend their backs forever.
So he's differentiating. I'm going to ask you to skip down to 17 and 18 because this is important. He's differentiating between those who are faithful in Israel and those who have not been faithful in Israel, who have led Israel astray and who have been hardened, never in any danger of accepting good advice, who've rejected Christ. So it's interesting. He's walking through a history of Israel, but I love that he does this. Throughout the ages of Israel, there have been remnants. And you know that. You read throughout the Old Testament, there are those who are faithful, there are those who are not. And so what he's saying is so too today. There are people who are faithful. Even today, right now, there's a remnant. And I think it's beautiful to see that. It's been pretty consistent. They happen to not be in charge, by the way, of national Israel. But that's going to change. So
then or now?
Not now. They're not in charge now.
Yeah,
that's
not now
obvious.
For sure. Yeah, no kidding.
So let's go to 17 and 18. This is very important for
Okay,
I want the
Romans 11:7.
supersessionists to think clear about this and stomach it because this is kind of a hit in the nuts. So let's read that, please.
But if some of the branches were broken off, and you, although a wild olive shoot, were grafted in among the others, and now share in the nourishing root of the olive tree, do not be arrogant toward the branches.
Yep.
Is that towards Israel?
Yes.
If you are, remember it is not you who support the root, but the root that supports you.
Boom.
Yeah, that's pretty tough.
Yeah. Okay.
You get that, Saldo? You're going to hell.
No, I think this is a salient. This
Salo.
is a salient. This is what I think is ironic. This is what happens when people pick verses to mount arguments.
Yeah.
The point is that Paul in Romans 9 through 11 is actually arguing for the centrality of Israel in bringing about the gospel. And because Israel has been unfaithful, he kicks them in the nuts.
Yeah, he sure
but he
does.
tells the Gentile, don't get arrogant. Don't come in here puffing your chest, thinking you're something special. First of all, it's all grace. This is all the same gospel.
Yeah.
This church was not meant to exclude Israel. It was meant to include Israel. Go ahead.
But some people use this, verse 20 and beyond. That is true. They were broken off because of their unbelief. But you stand fast through faith, so do not become proud. But so what do you mean they were broken off?
Remember, he's talking to Jews.
I understand.
95% Jews. So he's talking to Jews who are every bit as is Israelite as the people who are not faithful. And so he's talking to Gentiles now. Let's just be careful. People read that with their 21st century
No, I mean,
Gentile
he's saying,
eyes.
but they were broken off because
Yes.
of their unbelief. Who is he talking about? And
Well,
what does it mean to be broken off?
This is a nation that is out of compliance. God isn't using. Look around. God isn't using Israel because they're not being faithful, but that's not a disowning. So this is a partial. There's a remnant. This is a partial, and it's temporary. It's not complete and exhaustive.
So what
and
does
permanent.
broken off mean? I mean, hermeneutically, because I'm
In the context, these are people who have rejected Christ.
okay.
And so there's no question that some will be permanent. They're not going to change their mind. But there's a remnant who are faithful. In fact, he's addressing them right now through the letter of Romans. Broken off means they're not in communion. They're detached from God's purposes, God's gospel purposes. And so, I mean, listen, he spares no one here. He doesn't spare the uncompliant Jew, and he holds the compliant Jew to a great standard. And then he reminds the Gentile, don't get arrogant. I mean, you've come in now, you've been grafted in. Don't get arrogant. That's why he started with the message of grace. So I don't know how you can read Romans 9 to 11 and come away with literally the exact conclusion that Paul was meant to communicate unless you're reading this through replacement theology presuppositions. And I think that's dangerous. This always goes back to step back. Why is Paul writing this book? Read the whole thing. Don't read a verse. And then can you please go back, if you would, to Romans chapter 9, because the argument starts in 9. And let's go to Romans 9:6, if you could.
Mm-hmm. But it is not as though the word of God has failed. For not all who are descended from Israel belong to Israel. Mm-hmm. And not all are children of Abraham because they are his offspring.
The actual translation says, for they are not all Israel who are of Israel. And so
who are they? Who would they be?
Yeah, so the word, as I mentioned, the word in Hebrew literally means governed by God. And obviously what he's saying is not everyone born in Israel is governed by God. Look around right now. There's a lot of people in Israel who are not governed by God. But you have this you have this notion that just being an Israeli today doesn't automatically translate to belonging to God, which can only come, that's his argument, can only come through repentance and faith in Jesus. My point is that Paul makes it clear no one gets a free pass, and he started that in Romans chapter 2. He continues that into Romans 9. And so I'm not trying
to derail us.
No, go ahead.
But can because I've heard this and I've thought this, but I'm not saying this is my position. Can someone make the argument that the Jewish people worship a different God because they don't understand God's true nature? Because he's not. I mean, they don't believe in triune God.
I don't know that
they don't even believe in the Holy Spirit, right? I mean,
so it's not the same God.
I mean, I'm asking.
I would be careful about that.
I mean,
I'm not going to speak.
I'm not trying to be, heretical. I'm asking because to me, if someone doesn't describe all of George Araujo to me, and just uses your name, but doesn't describe all of you and your true character and your true nature, then they don't know you, and you're talking about someone else. You're not talking about George Araujo.
I think the problem that exists today is a problem that has existed from the very beginning. And you know how I phrase it, you know how I frame it, because I think it's appropriate. It's not just appropriate of Israelis. I think it's appropriate of, unfortunately, modern day Christendom.
Sure.
And that is that what we do is we worship Jesus on our terms, and they worship Yahweh on theirs. And that's been the problem from day one. This is the problem that Paul rails against. So you could argue that it's fundamentally, at the end of the day, a different God because you've made him into your image.
Right.
And so, but if you're going to do that,
but there's nothing is there anything heretical about me saying something like that?
No, I mean, I think the way you phrased it.
Because God,
here's how I
Yahweh is
it.
the same. I know. I've thought about that over the years.
Salo, if you would ask him who they worship, it's Elohim. So
I know, but Elohim means us, right? And if you go to Genesis, let's make man in our image.
Elohim.
I mean, he's not schizophrenic. I mean, so there's obviously plurality. There's three persons in one being, and they don't understand that Elohim. The translation is a plurality.
They do not see Elohim they don't see him in a composite.
But I want to answer his question before
like an infinitely unified composite. They don't see Elohim Trinitarian. Obviously, I mean they don't see the Trinitarian component there.
But if they don't see so I've wrestled with that over the years, because if God's true nature is three persons in one being, and Yahweh is God, the Father is God, the Son is God, Holy Spirit is God, and there's three persons in one being, and they don't believe in that, then you believe in something else.
Would you think it's the same criticism?
I'm right. I mean,
Nico, you think it's the same criticism when people say that Muslims and Christians worship the same?
No, because you have completely different character. It's different because before Jesus comes, we're all on the same page. They just don't understand God's true nature. The Islamic people, Allah comes from a moon god, Hubal, right? And then the Ishmael and Isaac and Ishmaelites, and they went out, and 500-600 years later, then Muhammad comes up with this religion that he's off the reservation.
That's right. Yeah.
I mean, and then God's character is different. Yeah. So Allah doesn't want to know you. You cannot know what God. He doesn't. So Allah's character is completely different than God's. Allah doesn't mind deception to push the movement. God can't lie. There's very few things God can't do. He cannot be unjust. He cannot murder, and he cannot lie, right? And he can't be inconsistent, by the way, because he's God. So no, I don't compare it exactly the same, but absolutely the Jews have an incomplete version of God because they don't believe in the second and third person of the.
Complete, or is it not the same thing?
Brother, I can't. I can say incomplete for sure. When you say not the same person, it doesn't automatically put you in the same boat as Islamic people. But
yes, it does. So in the sense
does?
that
Why?
Well, let me just explain that because you've covered a lot since Salo asked, and it was important that I let you finish. But the worst sin that you can commit, as you know, in Islam is shirk, and that's a violation of Surah or chapter 112, verse 1 in the Quran. It's because they're strict monotheists. And so the notion of associating anybody with Allah is blasphemy, and that is, that's punishable by death.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, in Judaism is a strict monotheistic faith. It is. And so when they say, Hear, O Israel, the Lord your God, the Lord is one, we see a compound unity there. They see a strict unity in that term. So there is a wrestle of how that term should be interpreted. And it's not by people who know Hebrew versus people who don't know Hebrew. These are people really who within the expertise of Hebrew linguistics who differ on that. Christianity, and I think to its favor, obviously, because I'm a Christian, I think wins that argument because it is treated as a composite, and the pronoun follows it. Let us make man in our image.
Right.
The pronouns that follow it are a plural composite. So that's the rub there. You see, they would say this is a strict unity. It is a strict monotheistic faith. It's one, literally one, versus a compound unity where you have this literally no daylight between the alignment of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. But to your point, you've got three persons,
right,
and one in one Godhead. So it's just a different view of that, and that's been the battle of the ages, But anyway, these are some of the arguments you can have with Messianic Jews before they became Messianic Jews, and that's one of the. I've talked to a lot of Messianic Jews. I'm originally from southeastern Pennsylvania, and as I've mentioned to you, I was for a time there attending many years ago, Beth Yeshua in Philadelphia, and I would get in these discussions, and they would share because I always wanted to know, how did you make the leap? And a lot of them would mention this component of discussion.
I mean, to defend some people that have genuine questions, I think Tucker's unreasonable, and I think Candace is unreasonable. But I mean, as much as we like to joke with Salo, I think Salo's an honest actor. I mean, he's genuinely questioning. I have another buddy of mine, I don't have permission to use his name, that genuinely questions, and it can be confusing if the terms are not defined properly, as in a contract, as in a court of law, and applied appropriately. I mean, you can have this confusion, right? And you can have this, you're arguing the wrong point because you have a lack of understanding, and I'm part of that lack of understanding, by the way. So, I guess scripturally, and we're going to go a little bit over because we started a little bit late, but what passages other than Matthew 21 do the proponents of replacement theology use to support their position?
I mean, one of the ones that you sent over, and it's commonly used, I think, is in 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9. And I frankly don't know why this is such a big deal. You've got, I don't get it. I don't know why this is. Again, the belief is that the church, which, there was no church. There literally was no church when Jesus was making these comments. He was talking to singularly Jews. So the notion that Jesus would have been talking in terms that they didn't understand at all in any way, I think that would have been bizarre. Yeah. And so they wouldn't have conceived of the way that the church is being conceived of today, that we literally took these covenant promises. What I always find ironic is that we want the blessings, but we don't want the curses. I always find that really interesting. And so Jesus was
everybody.
Yeah, how convenient.
Friends with benefits, right? That's what we want. That's what we want.
And
we want that.
And only
we
benefits,
want that.
but only benefits. Only benefits. So I think 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, is this idea that the church is this, is this nation at the exclusion.
I've seen that one. 1 Peter 2.
Yeah.
1 Peter 2:9.
1 Peter 2:9, the idea that the church is somehow this, this nation.
But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. Once you were not a people, but now you are God's people. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. I mean, that doesn't argue replacement theology.
No, the problem is, well, it does if you think he's talking singular to Gentiles, because he's using
Which just says
similar
that this sounds like it's your grafted in language.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So my point is, you can take 1 Peter chapter 2, verse 9, and you can, and the argument is, and this was actually part of that text that you sent me, the argument being that he's, the supposition is that he's talking to Gentiles. There's not a Jew to be found. And the irony is that Peter is not talking to exclusively Gentiles. He's talking to a group of believers who are both Jews and Gentile. And it's true. They've been grafted into one olive tree, a holy people.
Ephesians 2:14.
Amen. That's right. And that's right. And Jesus, Ephesians chapter 2. I mean, really, read verse, start at the beginning and read through verse 14.
Yeah, that's 14 is what it says that.
The point being that Jesus came and eroded, decimated those hostility, those barriers that were largely ethnic in nature. But it's not just ethnic. It's all kinds of other barriers that somehow seem insignificant when you look at the fact that of what Jesus did for each person, right? And forgiving them all of their transgressions. I mean, we ought to look at each other through skin differences and backgrounds and ethnic differences, really sort of look at them as if they're nothing compared to what Christ did for us.
So let me take a point of personal privilege, and hopefully it'll bless others when I do this. I hope so. Because I mean, so if we use this microphone just for example, demonstratively, as Christ entering the earth, Christ is Messiah. We have Christ on earth, right? I'm trying to toil with the logic that every Jew born before Christ just lucked out. Because if Christ hadn't come or waited another 100 years, then these Jews would have still been with Yahweh. Mucking it all up. Don't get me wrong. I mean, still doing the shit they were doing, but they would have still been with Yahweh. And just because Jesus came here and not there, now they still had a choice to reject him, but these people weren't even given that choice. Because if Jesus would have come here, then maybe there's a bunch of Jews in here that would have rejected him and for eternally separated from God. I'm trying to wrestle with that because God's consistent. He's logical. He's just. He's a God of order. And so is it that simple? And if God says it is, so be it. But I want to make sure it reconciles with his character. That if just as Jesus, if Jesus enters over here, there's a ton of Jews that would be eternally separated from God. If he enters over here, there'd be a ton of Jews that would be with God eternally. But because he came
from God
here,
isn't dependent on his timing. I don't understand.
But what I'm saying is Jews before Jesus did have an opportunity to reject Jesus.
Of course they did.
How?
Well, Abraham did. So why didn't they?
What do you mean Abraham did?
Jesus said so.
Jesus did. What do you mean Abraham rejected Jesus?
John chapter 8, verses 56 to 58. Okay, you're familiar with that.
Well, then how did he reject Jesus? He said he was looking forward to my coming.
Right.
Okay.
Okay, so he couldn't have rejected him?
Well, when was he looking forward to the coming? When he was on earth or after he was in heaven?
Well, Jesus... This is what was so scandalous because he's making a statement. Jesus is timeless. The idea that Abraham met or knew Jesus is it would have been
chapter 8 what?
John chapter 8 verses 56 to 58. Jesus is establishing that he's God. So he met and communed and knew Abraham. Abraham had an opportunity to know him.
When?
And respond. I don't know exactly when, but we have. Well, he's interacting with Yahweh. God pulls him out.
Give me 50 what? 50 what?
John 8, 56 to 58.
Okay, let me...
tail end of Genesis chapter 11, Abraham is plucked out of the ancient Near East. Yeah, we don't know if he used texting or email. Pretty sure he didn't. But how did he reach Abraham?
Before Abraham was, I am.
Okay.
That's a distinct. That's a.
I am God.
Divine claim.
Yeah, and I've been around
I'm not going to read
forever.
48. I'm sorry. I'm going to read it all because like you said, don't just read a verse. The Jews answered him, "Are we not right in saying that you are a Samaritan and have a demon?" Jesus answered, "I do not have a demon, but I honor my Father, and you dishonor me. Yet I do not seek my own glory. There is one, capital O, who seeks it, and he is the judge. Truly, truly, I say to you, if anyone keeps my word, you will never see death." The Jews said to him, "Now we know that you're a demon. Abraham died, as did the prophets, yet you say, if anyone keeps my word, he will never taste death." Now, they're obviously misinterpreting what he's talking about. "Are you greater than our father Abraham, who died, and the prophets died? Who do you make yourself out to be?" Jesus answered, "If I glorify myself, my glory is nothing. If I glorify my Father who glorifies me, of whom you say, he is our God. But you have not known him. I know him. If I were to say that I do not know him, I would be a liar like you." He's talking shit. "But I do know him, and I keep his word."
That's not in there.
That's the NLT translation. "Your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. He saw it and was glad." See, Mike, when I've always read that, I always looked at that as after Abraham left this earth. He left this earth.
No, why?
But who says that was why Abraham was? What scripture do we have that Abraham saw Jesus?
Because this is about Christophany and theophany. This is about the manifestation of God in the Old Testament. And there's a number of, so let's just start at the beginning. In Genesis chapter 12, we have tail end of Genesis.
How would Abraham see his day if he's not on the earth when it happened?
What I'm saying is that the messianic realities seemed to, according to Jesus, seemed to be something that Abraham would have apprehended, that he would have known about. I don't know the how. I get it, but we do have.
But what I'm saying is
theophanies.
Say what that is real quick. Say what that is.
And I always tell you, in the Old Testament, I think every theophany is a Christophany. But
Well,
a theophany is a physical manifestation that kind of points. It's a physical manifestation of God and or Christ that in the Old Testament.
Right.
Okay. So, and I just simply started at the beginning, at tail end of 11, Genesis 11, Genesis 12. Abraham's a pagan, Abram, and he's called, God calls him in a move to Egypt. You see at Bethel in chapter 13. You see Melchizedek in chapter 14, which we then find out in Hebrews chapter 7 through 10, specifically chapter 7, where Melchizedek is a theophany, really. So, we have lots of examples in the Abrahamic story where you have God appearing to him, and it's God. The angel of the Lord language is not literally an angel. That's interpreted by scholarship to be
So you're making the point,
theophany.
you believe that Abraham saw Jesus while Abraham was on earth.
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do.
I'm not going to argue that, but scholarly, that's.
Well, no, I'm saying I'm not pulling that out of thin air. I'm saying we have.
So your father Abraham rejoiced that he would see my day. When, though? He never saw his day. He saw it and was glad. When did he see it?
Well, we don't know the full extent when Jesus appeared to him. We don't know the full extent of conversation between Abraham and Jesus. We know what the texts tell us in 12, 13, and 14, and 15, and 16, and 17. We have theophanies in almost every chapter of Genesis where Abraham is involved, and then where Abraham is not involved. So there's appearances of God. The angel of the Lord is
obviously, if God appeared to Abram, Jesus did, because they're one.
Correct.
But there's no. I guess we're not given any details of the conversation saying, "Hey, by the way,
I'm not
the second person
I'm not
of the
doing
Trinity."
a literal for one. What I'm saying is that Abraham would have met with him, and so Jesus is suggesting here. We don't have a conversation transcript in the Old Testament. We do have evidence that you have God appearing to Abraham. And so Christ, who is eternal, who's part of the Godhead, I don't think it's a stretch to suggest that Abraham would have done exactly what Jesus is saying, that he would have known Jesus and that he would have looked forward to Jesus. Jesus is saying that. That's not hyperbole. There's no hyperbolic language there. So I'm just simply suggesting that if he can do it for Abraham, which is how we got in this conversation, if he can do it for Abraham,
I don't know,
and he can assign someone's response to him in faithfulness as righteousness, then, and you look at the covenant, really, the circumcision of the heart.
But he didn't do that to anybody else. So
no.
So how would somebody other than Abraham get that?
What's the covenant about? The Mosaic covenant given at Sinai. The Mosaic covenant, the circumcision of the heart is not a recent thing. That's Deuteronomy chapter 30 verses 1 through 10.
I'm being pragmatic, George. That's all. I'm saying that there is people that would have rejected Christ if he would have come sooner. They were all in with Yahweh, but they would have rejected Christ. Some people would have done that. People that said yes to Yahweh and are presumably with him would have rejected Christ. And if Christ would have come later, there's people that would have been with Yahweh that didn't have the opportunity to reject Christ.
So what are you not? What you're saying is that they would have accepted Christ if the timing had been different. Period.
Or rejected Christ if the timing would have been different. But yes.
Right. So, but what you're saying is that God would then
if Jesus
say,
would have come
you're
over here,
screwed
there's people
because you missed the arrival of Christ.
I'm not taking a position.
No,
I'm just
I'm
critically
saying,
thinking.
Isn't that the inference then?
Well, no, it's not an inference. I'm asking. I'm looking because I know that God is consistent.
Yeah.
And His character is good. And all I'm trying to. What I'm really doing is I'm having a focus group and anticipating my litigator on the other side. This is what I do for trial, by the way.
Sure.
I think about me arguing the other way, and if I can be ready for it inside of a trial. So I'm doing a focus group.
Sure.
Publicly about this issue. All I'm saying is, if Christ came earlier, people would have rejected Him here, and then they would have been separated.
But they would have
eternally.
rejected Him for the same reasons had He not come earlier. So the reasons are a hardening of the heart and a rejection of Him. The fact that He came when He did doesn't mean that people are automatically disqualified because they would have otherwise believed. Because now you're making a Calvinistic argument that basically, hey, that's the way it was kind of. They didn't really have a choice, but
I want to defend against that because I don't think Calvinism is
the point is that
reflects God's character at all. But all I'm saying is, but realistically, if Jesus would have come 100 years later,
okay,
people that rejected Him wouldn't have rejected Yahweh. And all I'm saying is you're separated from God eternally if you reject Christ once He showed up on the scene. That's all I'm saying. I'm just trying to prepare for the criticism on the other side. Jesus shows up here. If He shows up here, there's people here that would have made it, so to speak, because they didn't have an opportunity to reject Christ. If He shows up here, there's people that would have rejected Him sooner. So that's all I'm saying. I'm just trying to look for the. I want to make sure that I can defend. I'm not saying God's character is not consistent because it is. It's my lack of understanding.
Well, I mean, if the conclusion is that you have no daylight between God the Father and God the Son, and the covenant is the same, which is that you have righteousness assigned to you because of your faith in Him and in covenant, meaning in relationship, that covenant was with Christ. Okay, so Christ is simply Yahweh of the old. So there's no question that obviously if Jesus is here, you have less excuse. But that doesn't mean that now because Christ isn't here, let's say 100 years pre-Christ, that becomes a de facto excuse for rejecting Yahweh. Because there were lots of people who were in covenant. There were lots of people who were in relationship with Him. In fact, that was the basis. It wasn't just sort of keeping laws. That wasn't the basis for a relationship. The relationship was always the circumcision of the heart. They took it as a literal sort of de facto keeping of rogue laws, but it was always relationship-based. In fact, that was the description. They rejected that. They rejected relationship for Yahweh for ritual. But the relationship basis with Yahweh, who was Jesus in the Old Testament, Jesus is Yahweh. So that was always the same way. So I guess my point is, I was trying to hear you out. I would resist the notion that Jesus showing up when He did automatically disqualified a bunch of people before, because had He come before, because it's not just about timing.
I'm not saying it disqualified them automatically. I'm just saying what would have happened. I just think practically, I don't see how you can't agree that if Jesus comes 100 years earlier, there's a bunch of people that didn't reject Him because He wasn't on the scene that would have rejected Him. And then if He came 100 years later, there's people that rejected Him that wouldn't have rejected it because they didn't have an opportunity to reject Him. That's all I'm saying.
Well, the
I'm not
opportunity
making a claim. I'm
the
just
opportunity
asking.
to reject Yahweh, Christ incarnate in the first century, the opportunity to reject Yahweh had always been there. Had always been there. Now, if the argument is, obviously, if Jesus shows up, that's a boatload of grace that we have that previous generations didn't. Fair enough. And obviously, our excuse is less for rejecting Him. In fact, Jesus kind of makes that argument when He's talking to the Pharisees. He's basically saying, you guys are so stupid that it actually doesn't even matter. I mean, you killed the prophets. You've been doing this forever, And so not a big surprise that you're doing this now. The point is that you didn't need Jesus to show up to buy into the covenant with Yahweh. Now that He showed up, your excuse is like nil. It's zero because you have God incarnate. You have this incredible manifestation of grace where God dwells among men. What's your excuse? Fair enough. That's a good argument. But the idea that somehow you could say, well, it's because He was there, So you couldn't reject him because he was so convincing. But 100 years earlier, well, God, I rejected you because Jesus came 100 years after me. That's not going to fly. Because there were plenty of people pre-Jesus who had stepped up and given their hearts to Yahweh in covenant. So you could make the argument that it was much more convincing, but I don't think it's a de facto excuse.
No, I'm not saying it's a de facto excuse, Daddy. I'm thinking practically. I know God's
I don't think you're saying it. You're doing focus group language, but
yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that I can answer the question and that I can back it up.
But I want to use your answer.
What I do know, just because I don't know an answer, doesn't mean. I mean, I can trust God's character and not know an answer. What about the Aborigine and whatever and this tribe that's never? All I know is God's just, man, and His character is good. And so He's going to do the right thing. He's going to make the right decision.
Exactly.
I don't need to know all the facts because I have enough information about God's character.
No, there's people
good.
right now. We don't need to go to the Jewish example. There's people right now, and I mean, new tribes are being discovered every day. I don't think that's an exaggeration, of pockets of people who conceivably have obviously never heard of the gospel of Christ. So if they perish, and there's no missionary that makes it to them, do they perish eternally? And I just don't buy that.
I don't either.
I don't either.
God's character. Yeah,
and so how does God, and this is an important question, but here's where I draw the line in the sand with people who say, oh, it's impossible. Well, if it's impossible, then we got to ditch the entire Old Testament.
Yeah.
Because that's exactly what happened in the Old Testament. That's why I went back to Abraham, because it's radical. You get to Genesis chapter 11, you have the table of nations in Genesis 10, and in Genesis 11, all of a sudden, God is reaching out to some dude in the ancient Near East, near Mari and Haran, okay? And he's a pagan. So, I mean, just pause right there. So he did that. There's people today who could say are analogous to that condition. So what's he going to do? He's going to let them perish and send them to hell?
Yeah, no.
Absolutely not.
No, God's character is good, brother. I'm not, that's not my issue at all. I agree.
So that's where I think we need to land.
Well, look, I mean, we can talk for, this gets detailed, nuanced. The definitions matter. The language matters. The translation matters, which is hermeneutics. The linguistics matter because how they talk and what they meant by that expression.
And we've left a lot on the table,
oh,
too.
brother, we can't. There's no way.
we've
We
got,
already went over. I mean,
we've got prophetic comments, and we're going to do this in Old Testament survey. Throughout the entire law and the prophets, you've got chosen language, and you've got Davidic covenant, and you've got an eternal governance in Jerusalem by your messianic king. This is an everlasting nation. We got to talk about the end times. What happens in the 1,000-year reign of Christ? There's all kinds of really important conversations that are offshoots that I think will help color this in a little bit better. We just don't have time to do it today.
All right, anything, Saulo? We're good? All right, guys. Oh, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I'm learning. I hope this benefited you. There's so much here.
It's a lot.
It's just the tip of the iceberg. You and I have had these conversations before, and I learn something new every time. And, I know what I know. I know what I don't know. And so I always tell people I'm great at what I'm great at, good at what I'm good at, and I suck at what I suck at. And I'm not ashamed to put different things in each category. So hope this blessed you and helped you. Share this with someone you think may benefit from it. Have a blessed week and hope to see you, or hope you see us next week. Bye-bye.